Raman and other consultants of Sankara Nethralaya, this famed and great institution, one of the greatest institutions this country has ever produced. Other trustees, invitees, faculty, students of Sankara Nethralaya, ladies and gentlemen. I deem it a very great honor to stand in front of you whenever I enter the portals of this hallowed institution. It's a very humbling experience. Even as a student, I have seen Dr. Badrinath and his wife and colleagues establish this very great institution. And so the first thing I'd like to do is to dedicate this lecture to Dr. Badrinath, who has really been a role model for me all my life. I know it might take 2 minutes extra, but I think it's worth telling this audience just one or two incidents which shows you that it's very difficult to be a Dr. Badrinath, for anyone else to be a Dr. Badrinath. When we started, my wife, as Dr. Badrinath mentioned, was an ophthalmologist. She was his student in Sankara Nethralaya. So when we wanted to set up a small theatre in Roypuram in my father's hospital to do cataract surgery, so my wife and I asked for an appointment to meet him to help to set up a small cataract surgery unit, a small ophthalmic unit in our Roypuram center. So he gave us an appointment, meet me at 10:30. So we said, oh, 10:30 a.m. No, 10:30 p.m. he said. So we were the first shock for us, because 10:30 p.m. is actually giving an appointment, you know. I would like to ask youngsters who are here, and I know Sankara Nethralaya really drives you all quite hard, and as I do, my students too. How many of you will give an appointment at 10:30 p.m. to somebody, you know? So we came to Sankara Nethralaya at 10:30 p.m. and he was in the theatre. He's still operating. And at 10:30, after doing so many surgeries, I understood he's been operating from the morning, except for a short break. And then at 10:30, promptly, he comes to meet us, fresh, as if he's just got up and he's just got ready and he has come. And we were amazed, and we said, at 10:30 p.m., after doing all the surgery, not only he's fresh and he has the energy to meet us, but now he's meeting us for our benefit, for us to set up a small theatre in Roypuram. After a few minutes, after discussing with us, he said, no, you know what? I have to come and see that place. And this is in Roypuram. You can imagine the traffic, it will take you 1 hour to reach Roypuram from here. So we said, sir, maybe you can just draw the... No, I have to come personally, he said. And the next day, amidst all his other activities, the very next day, he made it a point to drive all the way to Roypuram. And then when we told him, we had no idea how to set up a theatre at that time. We were a pure medical nursing home. And then my father started with pure medical nursing home. Then we made it just a diabetic center. We never had theatre. We had nothing there. And it's the first theatre we are setting up there. So he comes and he says, this is how you have to have a double door. You know, for infection, you have to do this, you have to do that. He spent almost an hour with us trying to help us to set up an operation theatre in which he is not involved at all. That is Dr. Badrinath. And so I would like you all to give him a big hand. Sir, I cannot tell you how much we may never get an opportunity to directly come and talk to you. So when such an opportunity comes, I think we should put it on record that we are all your great admirers. And I don't think there are many doctors like this, not only in India, but in the world. I'd like to start by offering my humble pranams at the divine lotus feet of my Lord and Master, Bhagavan Sri Sathya Sai Baba, who was and continues to inspire me throughout my life, and every single action of mine is guided by my Lord. Dr. Badrinath mentioned my father, and but for him, he was really a pioneer because he started the first diabetic clinic in Stanley in 1948. Today we know that diabetes is a big problem, but in 1948, you can imagine how many diabetics there were in the whole of Chennai. And at that time, to have a vision to start a specialty in diabetes, I think really takes a visionary, and that's what he was. At the age of 18, I was invited to join him, and I took up medicine only to serve him. And that's the reason why I'm here today, because of the very early start in life and all the encouragement that he gave me. The real secret of my success is my dear wife, whom I lost 3 years ago. So she has been the backbone, the partner in everything that we did in the early years, the first 20 years with my father, and then subsequently after we left, almost the next 20 years, subsequently when we built our own center almost from scratch. And but for her vision, but for her courage, I don't think I would have taken any of the steps that I took. But also there is a huge, like the Sankara Nethralaya family, we also have a Dr.Mohan's family. And immediate family itself, I'm blessed to have my daughter, Dr. Anjana, and my son-in-law. In fact, he got his FRCP yesterday in Glasgow, and that's why they're not here, otherwise they would have come. That's my wife's younger sister, and a whole Rekha, who's now a CEO, and a whole lot of scientists. And I was just talking to Dr. Badrinath that Dr. Balasubramaniam told me to tell the scientists here that there are some collaborative projects which he wants to collaborate, and I said maybe tomorrow may not be the forum to talk, but we'll definitely come back, and we hope to have a lot of collaboration with you, because you have a huge set of scientists who are working in various aspects. Now, having said that, let me dip straight into the subject of today, which is how to curb the diabetes menace in India. This is a slide which I helped my father to make. It's not the exact slide, but these are the figures when I was a medical student. And my father used to have this famous slide saying that the diabetes in India is not a problem as yet, and this is 1970s. And he used to say that in urban India, about 2%, in Chennai, for example, about 2% of people have diabetes. In rural areas, about 1%, it's about half. But then he used to show another slide saying that, but when Indians migrate, something happens to them. And of course, these are in different periods. They're not, one is 80s, one is 90s, and so on. But you can see the figures going to 11%, 13%, 12%, even 16% in Malaysia. So when they study in Malaysia or Singapore, if you study the Malays, the Chinese, and the Indians are the highest. If in South Africa you studied the whites, the blacks, and the Indians are the highest. And so too in the UK and the US and everywhere they went, Indians had the highest. So he used to say that when Indians migrate, something happens to them and they have large percentages of diabetes, which we in India are not yet having. And of course, he used to predict it, and that's why, as Dr. Badrinath said, he already used to talk about prevention those days, saying that they're the same Indians there and the same Indians here. If they get it, one day we'll also get it. And I'll show you that his prediction has come true. In fact, we're now doing worse than the West. I'll show you that. So if you look at the figures of how this diabetes epidemic has moved from the 2% which I mentioned, that was a 1972 study, these are different studies. And of course, they're not India as such. It's New Delhi and some of the places in Andhra Pradesh, and again Chennai, Ernakulam, and so on. But you can see whatever it is, and there are different studies done at different times, different sampling frames. But one thing is very consistent. The prevalence, look at just urban. This is the prevalence, the percentage of people who have diabetes. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 11, 12, 19. And the latest study now, which is just under publication, is under review, is 24% of people in Chennai have diabetes. Now, this is people who are above 20 years of age. We're not talking about old people. We're talking about people above 20 years of age. And what was 2% has now become 24.7%. And it doesn't mean, so it's a 10-fold increase in prevalence in 40 years' time. And in rural areas, we're not lagging behind. 1%, 2%, now it's gone to 14%, 16%. So the rural areas, what's going to happen is that another 10 years from now, the rural areas will exceed the urban areas. It's already happening in Kerala, and it's happened in the West. So same thing is going to happen here. It's moving from rich people to poor people, as I'll show you. And it's moving also from old people to young people, and even children. So there's a huge problem that we have in our mind. But let me get back to the migrant Indian story. This is a study which we've just submitted publication. So what we have is 2 studies. One is called as a masala study, the mediators of atherosclerosis in South Asians, masala study. Okay, this is done in San Francisco, in the city of San Francisco, in urban, and this is only in South Asians, predominantly Indians. 90% are Indians. And then we looked at Chennai, and this is our latest study in Chennai. Red is Chennai, and yellow is San Francisco. Here we're taken 40 years and above because they don't have below 40 years. The study starts only between 40 to 80 years. So to match, we took 40 to 80 years. So you can see that whether it's 40 to 44, 45 to 54, 55 to 64, 65 plus, Indians in Chennai now have higher prevalence rates than Indians in San Francisco. This is the exact opposite of what my father said. Okay? He said only when you migrate you'll get it. Well, it used to be like that. But they have started looking after themselves. The migrant Indians are today much more healthy. They know what to eat. They are exercising. They have adapted to the Western culture, and therefore part of the Western culture includes physical activity and so on. Also, it's a very literate population there. Most of them are doctors, lawyers, and so on. They really know how to look after their health. So this is a good news that theirs is kind of stabilized. It's not increased over the last 5 to 10 years. It's kind of stabilized. Whereas we here have still not got our act together. And that's why I congratulate Dr. Badrinath for actually calling this. How do we tackle this menace? Because it couldn't be more appropriate than now. The study was just submitted 2-3 weeks ago. And this is exactly the problem. It has become a menace. Because if it goes to poor people, it goes to young people, it goes to rural areas where there are no doctors, and I'll talk about that, we really have a problem. Now, this is one more slide from the same study. This is not San Francisco now. This is just Chennai. Okay? The red shows you diabetes. The red shows you pre-diabetes, and the yellow is diabetes. Okay? So if you look at the prevalence rates of diabetes and pre-diabetes put together, actually it's the other way around. The red is diabetes and the yellow is pre-diabetes, because some of the pre-diabetes rates are not that high in India because they are converting very fast to diabetes. But 40 to 44 years, if you take everybody living in Chennai, 58% have either diabetes or pre-diabetes. 54 years, 64 years, and 65 plus, almost 75% of the population has either diabetes or pre-diabetes. So it's very difficult to find a normal person. If you walk on the road, you stand on the road and just count everyone above 50 years, only quarter of them out of 100 people, 75 you can classify as either diabetes or pre-diabetes. Only 25% are normal now. That's very worrisome. But again, there's a good news. All these pre-diabetics here need not convert to diabetes. They can actually go back and become normal. So we also have a huge window of opportunity here to try to do something, and that's what the rest of the talk is going to be. The bigger problem, and Sankara Nethralaya is the best place to give you data on retinopathy, because they have huge studies both in urban, rural, and I know Rajiv Raman has done a lot of epidemiological studies here. So the figures, amazingly, are very similar. The Sankara Nethralaya figure, ours, and the Arvind Eye Hospital figures, they differ. They're all different studies done at only 0.2, 0.3% difference. All are between 17.8, 17.6 and 18% is the entire prevalence rate of diabetes. That's for retinopathy, okay? And there's peripheral vascular disease, coronary artery disease. Coronary artery disease is 1 in 5 in urban areas. I just want you to focus on one complication. Let's take the nephropathy, for example. A quarter of people have diabetic kidney disease, okay? Now, I'm not saying that they're all in renal failure. I'm not saying they all need dialysis and so on. But they have kidney failure. They have kidney disease, earliest, microalbuminuria, all put together. Now, even assuming that a third of them actually progress, that's a very conservative estimate. Say a third of them progress to develop end-stage renal disease, which needs dialysis and transplantation. This 20% works out to about 17 million people in India who have diabetic kidney disease. So if you say a third of them progress, 5 million Indians need transplantation or dialysis. That's the whole population of Sweden, that's the whole population of Denmark, that's 4 times the population of Mauritius, that's almost a fifth of the population of Australia needing dialysis and transplantation. And Dr. M.K. Mani will tell you, if you ask him, and other experts will tell you, that only 2% of Indians can afford either dialysis or transplantation. That means the rest will die. 98, if you don't treat them, there's no option, they'll die. So, we have no option except to wake up. These are not numbers just created, fictitious numbers created. We have a huge problem. We have a time bomb ticking away, and unless we act early enough, and unless we take this seriously, neither the government, nor NGOs, nor any institution will be able to provide that kind of support. For 5 million people, 5 million transplants, 5 million, where will you get 5 million kidneys from to start with? Or where will you have 5 million dialysis going on forever? It's impossible. So that is why we have to do something, okay? I just want to spend a minute on why are Indians more prone to diabetes. This is something we have been researching on. My own research on this for the last 20 years has thrown up a lot of ideas. We've got a lot of clues. We have higher insulin levels than Westerners. We have low HDL cholesterol levels. We have increased triglyceride levels. We have low adiponectin, the friendly hormone. We have more of hsCRP, the bad one, okay, the C-reactive protein, the inflammatory marker, and so on and so forth. So there is a lot of this, what I collectively called as the Asian Indian phenotype. This is what makes us more prone, okay. The question is this due to genetic factors or is it due to environmental factors? Now, if it is due to genetic factors, nothing can be done about it. If it is due to environmental factors, then a lot can be done about it. To be fair, it is due to both. But luckily, the genetic component is not all that high. The environmental component is much more. And as a simple example of that, in 40 years, if in Chennai we went from 2% to 20%, our genes didn't change in 40 years. What changed was the environment. We are still the same. Many of us were there 40 years ago, we are still here now. Our genes didn't change. But what changed was the environment. The environment totally changed. But talking about the genetic factor, I just want to show you one slide that there are some unique factors which make us more prone. This is a paper we published in Nature Genetics. This is the topmost journal in the world, where in the year 2011, we discovered 6 novel genes which are found only in Indians. They're not found in Japanese, Chinese, or any other population in the world. These are unique genes as far as Indians are concerned. But what does this mean? What do these genes contribute? How much do they contribute to the epidemic? Probably nothing. The genes are there. They probably have a background. That's maybe the reason why the Indians have a little more than the Chinese and the Malays and so on. But that's not the epidemic at all. The epidemic is occurring all over the world, and that's not due to genes at all. Okay? So let's look at the environmental factors. Today, I would put it to you that India is suffering from a disease called as affluenza. Now, what is affluenza? Being affluent, being rich. That itself is a disease. Because what happens is, when you become rich, what happens is, you no longer carry loads on your weight, on your head, you carry only cell phones. Okay? You don't play in the fields like this. Rich people don't play like that. They are given computer games to work. So you don't play football, you play only virtual football now. Okay? And then, instead of kind of eating the diet like this, our youngsters were earning a lot, of course. They're working in call centers, they're working for US, they're earning in dollars and so on. But that's what they end up eating. All the junk foods, the colas, the chips, the burgers. So what really happens is that your glycemic load goes up. You start eating more sugar. And this sugar or carbohydrate in Chennai comes from one item, white rice. So rice gives you 50% of all the calories in Chennai. It's not just the cola, it's not just the gulab jamun alone. That you don't take every day, and you don't take 1 kilo of gulab jamun or rasgulla, you don't eat every day. You take it occasionally. That's not the total, that is a contributor, but that's not the main contributor. Main contributor is white rice. The other is decreased physical activity. So let's look at those two. This is a study we did and published in the British Journal of Nutrition. Actually, to be very honest, it was Bhagwan Baba who told me about this. In an interview, he asked me, have you looked at your rice? Do you know what is the cause of the epidemic? And I tried telling him about genes and so on, and he said, no. You've got data with you. You're not looking at it. Go and look at your data. Look at your white rice. You'll see that it is increasing, he said. So I came back and looked at my data, and lo and behold, there it was. So if you take 200 grams of rice, if you take the odds ratio as 1, if you double your rice intake to 400 grams, there is a 4-fold increase in diabetes. This is after correcting for obesity, physical activity, family history of diabetes, body mass index, and everything. There's still a 4-fold increase, exactly as Baba had told me. So we had to work very hard, and first we produced what is called as brown rice, the old method of hand-pound rice and so on. I'm not showing you the data for lack of time, but we did a 2-3 years work in this. Very good, reduces blood sugar levels, but nobody wants it. They don't like the taste. It's very difficult to cook. It's difficult to chew. They said, "Maad saapra mari irukku." It's like a cow eating rice. We can't eat it. See? So we flopped. We said, no, we can't. Then we started working with agricultural scientists in Coimbatore. And after about 5 to 6 years of work, of working on almost 200 to 300 varieties of rice, suddenly we hit upon one rice, which is having 5 times higher dietary fiber than any other rice in the world. It has 8 grams of dietary fiber. The only other rice in the world which has is about 1.5 grams of rice. This has 8 grams of dietary fiber. So it took a few years. It's only from the seeds we produced it. Then we started lab production. Then we started testing. Then we did glycemic index studies on it. Then we brought it to our centers. Now it's in the market. So now in any supermarket in Chennai you can get it. Now we are trying to push it to the rest of the country and even abroad. So this is called the high fiber rice. And this is the first in the world product. Now these are what are called as the continuous glucose curves. So if you look at the continuous glucose curves, the red is after ordinary white rice. It's called the Bapatla rice or the BPT rice, or normal white rice. And the blue is after our high fiber rice. You can see that every day, this is a day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. These are continuous glucose curves, and people are eating, one group is eating this, then we cross over and do the other study, and you can see a significant reduction in the blood glucose levels as well as in the insulin levels. And in long-term studies now, we are finding even the weight coming down because of the higher fiber intake. So this is the kind of thing that we need, that we have to, if either you cut down on the rice that you take, or you change over to healthier varieties of rice. And even a single interaction like that, a single intervention like this can produce a lot of results. What about physical activity? One cannot underplay the role of physical activity. This is a study we did a few years ago, published in Diabetic Medicine, where we looked at those who do heavy activity in Chennai, moderate activity in Chennai, and light activity in Chennai. Among the heavy activity people, the diabetes is only 5% in Chennai. It's the same city. So the genes are the same. But the prevalence of diabetes is only 5%. Those who are moderately active, it doubles, 10%. It further doubles to almost 17% in those who are sedentary. So here's a clear example that if you are sedentary, your diabetes risk goes up threefold at least. Okay? And this is a modifiable risk factor. Age you cannot change. You cannot change your father and mother. The genes you cannot change. But this you can change. The type of diet you eat you can change. So if you want to prevent diabetes, in the last part of my talk, I'm just going to talk about 2 examples of how we have succeeded in going into the community. It's all very good to sit in a clinic and they come to you, talk to them about a few things. But how do you change behavior in people? That is most important. So the idea was that if you want to prevent diabetes, now suppose people are getting at age 40. In fact, it's not 40 now. It's moving to 30s and 20s. So younger and younger people are now getting diabetes. But what if you can reverse it and make them get it at 50, 60, 70? Now it takes another 20 years to get complications. If somebody gets it at 60 or 70, you're talking about 90 years when you get complication diabetes. That's fine, because you get something when you're that old. Okay, so little diabetes doesn't matter. But if you get it if you're 20 years old or 15 years old, by the time you're 30 or 40, if you're going to get kidney problem, and if all our youngsters are going to need dialysis or bypass surgery and so on. Yesterday one cardiologist called me and they said a 21-year-old boy had heart attack and he's done a bypass for him, age 21. Okay, and that's not unusual. I said it's an unusual case. It's not unusual. I've done about 10, 20 like that already at age 20. No? So there is a problem. We do have a problem. So can we achieve this by diet, physical activity, decreasing stress and so on? I'll give you 2 examples to show you how it's possible. My first foray into epidemiology was in the year 1998. Till then I was a clinician, never forayed out of my practice. Then I found that I had no normal values at all. Everybody who came is diabetic. So somebody asked me, what's normal cholesterol? I don't know. I've not seen a normal person. Only if you have diabetes, you come to me. I never see normal people. Only diabetics I see. So I wanted to have some normal values to see how normal people look like. What is a normal triglyceride? What is a normal, no? So for that we started a study. And we also asked a simple question. Okay, we talk about urban-rural differences. But within an urban area, if you select a middle-income group, which is where the majority of people in India, in Chennai live, compare it to the slum, poorer people. Okay, this is the Asiad colony. And that's a T-Nagar slum, the Bharatinagar slum. So we said, will there be difference between the two? Obviously there will be. But believe it or not, there's not a single paper in the world which has looked at an intra-urban study at the time. So we went ahead and did just GTTs in all these people. And no big surprise. Of course, you got into a good journal because there's no data at that time. So about 12% of people in the middle income group had diabetes compared to half in the low income group. So what we said was, let's leave the low income group people aside for a moment. This is 2000, 14 years ago. The reason was, they had so many other problems. They had alcohol problem, they had smoking problem, they had TB problem, they had worm infestation. They hardly had 2 meals to eat. Now go and tell them don't eat, cut down, do exercise. We thought it was too premature at that time. In retrospect, it was a mistake, and I'll tell you. But the middle income group, we said, look, you've got a problem. My father used to talk about 2%. Now we're talking about 12%. I told them at that time, I bet it will reach 20%, 25% in another 10, 15 years. At the rate of growth, you see the plot the rate of growth, it looks as if you're going to reach there. So unless you do something about it. So they said, what can we do? We said the simplest thing to do, increase exercise. Then they said, no sir, where we can do exercise? In Chennai, if you go on the road, either you'll be bitten by a dog, okay, or the dog will chase you, or chain snatcher will come and take away your chain, or the pollution will kill you, or a truck will come and hit you. Okay? There's no place to walk. So they were saying that. While they were saying that in the colony, when we were talking, just next to the colony, we found there's an open plot of land. Okay? And that video will show you that. So that's the colony, and that's the open plot of land. There's nothing there at that time. So we said, why don't you build a park? So they first applied to the government. Government didn't do anything. So for the first time, these people themselves, they invested and built this park. It's called the Asian Colony Park. It's still there. You can go and see it. It's one of the best parks in Chennai. Simple reason, Tirukural slogans are there. Piped music is there. Walkways are there. Okay? So people now can start walking. Where there was no place to walk, we said, instead of building another colony, do this. It's worthwhile for you to do it. So they did that. And children who had no place to play at all now have a playground to play. So you can see that children are also able to play now. So the complete transformation took place in not only that colony but all the nearby colonies. This became a big story. So the press wrote about it, WHO picked it up, and they said how the poor can, raise funds themselves and, do it themselves, and how this is community empowerment. Okay. But that was not my interest. It's not just building a park. You have to take it as a scientist, you have to take it to the next level. So what happened after building the park? That's the most important thing. Critics said, oh, after the first 1 week, they'll stop going. People will never keep it up. Wrong. What happened was that from 13% of people who exercised, 5 years later, it went to 52% of people. That's a 277% increase in exercises, and it still continues. That colony still exercises. So, moral of the story is, if you give people an opportunity and you give them a place and encouragement and motivation, people will do it. You have to show them the way. Okay? Again, it was not answered. Okay, they started exercising. So what happened to the diabetes? Did you slow it down? So we went back. 10 years later, we went back. Now, by the time what happened, forget about this 24.7, which is latest data. Around that time, it was around 18% in Chennai. That's the growth in Chennai, incidentally. You can see 2, 8, 11, 13, 14, 18, 27. I don't know where it's going to end. Whether it's going to stabilize at 27 or not. I think it's in our hands, and I'll come back to that in a minute. So it is around 18%. 18% includes the poor people. Okay? So we did in the colonies around Asiad colony, we did about 22, 24 already in the middle income group. So we said, okay, if we now go back and we find it is anything less than say 20% or so, then we have prevented diabetes. Some of you may ask me, why didn't it come down to 0? They started walking, diabetes should be 0. There are non-modifiable risk factors. Age is one of them. And going back to the same colony, now they're 10 years older. They'll definitely have more diabetes, more blood pressure, and more of every disease, more joint problem, more everything they'll have. Because age is something you cannot change. So diabetes prevalence will not go down in the same population if you study it. In a fresh population you can. So remember it was 12.4%. So when we went back after 10 years and we published this in 2011, what we found was it went up by a modest 24%. Okay, it's only 15%, whereas Chennai average itself is 18. So that's a huge reduction. Okay. But that's a good news, that with a little bit of walking you can prevent it. Now comes the bad news. Remember, we left this colony alone, 6.5%. These are poor people living in slums. Just imagine what happened to them after 15 years. It's gone up to 15.3%. So what was half, okay, in the poor people has now become equal. Of course, you may say that this particular colony was excising a little bit. It could have been 18, 19. Fine. But this increase is something that's totally unexpected. Today, if I was to take a decision like that, it would be totally unethical. I cannot leave the poor people out because they are also equally prone. But at that time, I did not know this. And that's why we left them out. So that's the bad news, that the poor are getting it. And the poor man, if he or she gets diabetes, has to spend 25% of his income just to pay for the diabetic medicines. They can't afford it. And if you go to rural areas, which I'm going to talk about next, there is no treatment at all. Okay, so here is an example of translational research through community empowerment, and that's what exactly Sankara Nethralaya does through your mobile camps, through your mobile hospitals, through your mobile surgeries, going to rural areas, telemedicine. This is exactly what an institution should be doing, because it is not enough if we just sit in our own clinics and treat the patients who come here. That's only the tip of the iceberg. We have to reach out to the community, and we have to reach out and extend our hands, because a lot of people waiting out there who have no access to anything. And that's what my last part of my talk is about, the rural problem in India. Now, if you take the urban population of India, it's only 28%. Okay? And about, if you take that 65 million people with diabetes in India, 27 million are in urban areas. Rural areas admittedly have lower prevalence of diabetes, but 72% of the population lives there, which means that 35 million people are having diabetes in rural areas where there is lack of awareness, lack of access, transportation, poverty, and absolutely no specialized diabetes care. Okay? Therefore, we felt that we should make the 4A test possible. So that is, make diabetes care available, accessible, affordable, and acceptable in rural India. So that was a challenge. So this is a dream. Actually, it was my wife's dream. We should do something about it for rural area. Just at that time, providentially, Mr. C. Ramakrishna, who is a very big admirer and supporter of Sankara Nethralaya from Chunampet, gave me a call. And he said, come and see me. So I went to see him. I didn't even know what Chunampet was. So he called me to Chunampet. So I went there. So he said, okay, I'm going to give away some land. Okay? And I'm going to give you about 9-10 acres of land. But first tell me what you'll do. I'll give you 10 minutes, go outside, think about it, come back. I didn't even know why he called me. So I went out, thought about it, then I went back. You ready? He said. I said, I'm ready. So what are you going to do? I said, I'll do two things. One, I didn't know what Chunampet was. Okay? Quite honestly, when you called me, I didn't know what Chunampet was. By the time we finish with this project, we'll do a project here. Chunampet will become world famous. That's the first thing. Like Framingham and all, Chunampet will become a buzzword in diabetes. That's one thing. He liked that a lot. The other thing I told him was, you're giving it free. So I don't need to take any money out of Chunampet. So I will not take 1 rupee out of Chunampet. We will give to Chunampet. We will not take from Chunampet. And that I'll give it to you in writing. So he was very happy. He gave us the land. Once he gave us the land, we went to the World Diabetes Foundation, who gave us a van, which I'll show you. And then we went to the Indian Space Research Organization, which gave the same satellite as given to Sankara Nethralaya. They gave it to us. And so we started studying all these villages. And that's Chunampet, incidentally. That's Kanchipuram district, and the southern tip there you can see Chunampet there. Okay, so that's a van, and inside we have the facilities for training for complications, foot, eye, other complications. We have telemedicine facility, and so on and so forth. And this video shows you what we do. So we go to houses like this, and what we did was we took unemployed youth from Chunampet, trained them at our center, and put them back there, because there's no point asking people from Chennai to go there. Doctors won't go, so they have to be trained. So they do blood pressures, blood sugars, everything is done by them. Okay? And then results are given back to the patients at their doorstep. The van is just there. So if they need to have further investigations, eyes, kidneys, heart, feet, everything can be checked inside the van. You can see the driver, incidentally, is a technician too. Because why should he? I mean, after driving, what does he do? So the rest of the time, he's a technician taking pictures. So he takes eye pictures and sends it back to our center. And here is Pradeepa, our senior ophthalmologist, talking to the lady inside the van with a model telling her what is the retina and what we are doing for her and what is diabetic retinopathy and so on. We built, true to our word, we built the Sai Rural Center there. My wife and I donated this money. We found this doctor there, Dr. Rakesh. He was practicing next door there. We pulled him over and said, you get trained in diabetes and you go back there to your own place. You know, we are not sending doctors from here. So we trained him, put him back there, and then the results were amazing. So 42 villages, the government gave us a blanket permission and said, you take over these villages, but give us yearly reports. So we went beyond those 42 villages, and about 200,000 people were able to give diabetes awareness. The entire 42 villages, 50,000 population, 27,000 adults, we screened them all for diabetes. And every single one of them was screened for all the complication diabetes, and therefore we got the first rural data on complications of diabetes in this country, on retinopathy, neuropathy, nephropathy, PVD, coronary artery disease, and so on. What is more satisfying was that the HbA1c came down in all these villages from 9.3% to 8.5% the first year, and now it's got even better. And these are people who had absolutely using very low-cost generic drugs. So, true to what I had told the Zamindar, C. Ramakrishna, the Lancet, when it wrote its a series of 5 articles on January 12th, 2011 on India, there was one article on chronic diseases and injuries, and there the Chunampet Rural Diabetes Project was mentioned as by saying that the Chunampet Rural Diabetes Project thus seems to be a good model for delivering preventive and therapeutic diabetes healthcare to rural areas. Soon after that, there was an article in Nature by Jared Diamond, where he wrote on diabetes in India and covered all this work. And in fact, what we were most happy was that out of 13 references that Lancet allows, There were only 7 references of Indian work. The others were all foreign works. You can see the foreign references there. They are not based on Indian work, but general one. Out of the 7, 6 were from work done from the Madras Diabetes Research Foundation. So it was very gratifying. Soon after that, we had CNN, Discovery Channel. Actually, Discovery Channel has shown this 8 times, the whole Chunampet program. BBC came, Le Monde. The Le Monde in France, we read this headline. This is the first page of the Le Monde, the largest newspaper in France. It says that in India, the poor people can now afford diabetes treatment. The whole first page was about this particular project. And then there was also the Business World and many others. And Jugaad, this book called Jugaad Innovation, you must have seen, where Ratan Tata and others have written chapters. Chapter number 4 is on the Chunampet project. This is not on healthcare at all. This is just innovation in India. And this whole chapter on Chunampet is there, and BBC also covered it. So virtually the whole world had given prominence to this. So I'd like to conclude, ladies and gentlemen, by saying that the diabetes epidemic in India is still spiraling upwards. Diabetes is no longer an urban phenomenon. It is now moving to the poor and to the young, and there's a huge burden of diabetes-related complications. Therefore, there's an urgent need for prevention of diabetes before it cripples the individual, the family, and the country. And diabetes is preventable, but teamwork and passion are needed, and together we can do it. I think we should all collaborate. Everyone, it's a multi-stakeholder approach. Diabetes prevention doesn't come by writing a prescription, by writing a drug. It doesn't come. It's by the whole. Diabetes is prevented by people building a park, not by a prescription that we dished out. So in every sphere, if we can think of healthy living, physical activity, some change in diet, some stress reduction, diabetes prevalence can definitely, and this menace, as Dr. Badrinath called it, can definitely be tamed. Thank you very much.